Okay, now I'm going to have you do 3 homework problems in MyMathLab where you're graphing parabolas. The first one's going to look something like this. The whatever you're adding here might change, but other than that, it'll look the same, and it's just a multiple choice problem. So you're going to plot points. You can use the same input values I used for the graph in green and the graph in blue, and you're going to graph this by hand on a separate sheet of paper, and then come back to MyMathLab and select the right answer. The next one's a little bit more complicated. You're going to graph f of x equals x plus 7 quantities squared. So let me show you how to do that. Okay, so let's graph this thing, and let's first think about what kind of input values you want to plug in. Now, you're not going to want to plug in the same input values that I did just a minute ago when I plotted x squared and negative x squared. In this problem, you're going to want to plug in values that are close to negative 7 for x. So in fact, you're going to want to plug in negative 7 to start with. Why? Well, because values that are close to negative 7 will produce outputs that aren't too big, and will be easy. You'll be easy to graph those corresponding points. So for instance, if you plug in negative 7 for x, negative 7 plus 7 is 0, squared is 0. So you're going to want to plug in that point, the point that makes this, or the x value rather, that makes that whole thing 0. And then values close to that. So you could plot in like negative 8, negative 9, negative 6, negative 5. So values that aren't too far away from negative 7. If you plug in negative 8, for instance, f of negative 8, think about it. You're going to have negative 8 plus 7 is negative 1, and then you're going to square that and get positive 1. Whereas if you plug in negative 9, you'll end up with negative 2 squared, which is positive 4. If you plug in negative 6, you'll end up with 1 squared, which is 1. If you plug in negative 5, you'll end up with 2 squared, which is 4. So plot those values. And I would start with this point because it's going to be the vertex, the number you can plug in here, and that makes this 0. It's always going to be the vertex. I think you'll see that pretty quickly here. So negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we know at negative 6, we're up at a height of 1. And at negative 8, we're up at a height of 1. Negative 9, we're at a height of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Negative 5, we're at a height of 4 as well. Draw a nice kind of smooth, rounded shape at the bottom. It's actually a little more pointed than I want, but close enough. And there you go. Now, in this problem, they also want you to graph the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is the line that cuts the parabola in half. It's the line, it's the vertical line that cuts the parabola in half. It goes right through the middle. And so it's that line right there. I'll say more about the axis of symmetry in a few minutes, but you just need it to complete the homework problem. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you actually how to input this graph into MyMathLab. But before I do that, I just want to mention this. Look for a pattern. In all of these homework problems, look for a pattern. See if you can tell just by looking at this equation what the vertex is going to be. Remember, the vertex is the low point or the high point. In all the first 3 homework problems, they're all low points. So this is the vertex right here. See if you can tell just by looking at this equation what the vertex is. See if, going back into MyMathLab, see if you can tell just by looking at y equals x squared plus 2 what the vertex is going to be after you get the graph. See if you see a pattern. Use your superpower. Every human has a superpower. It's called pattern recognition. Make sure you can recognize this pattern. How can you use the equation in all of these first 3 problems to identify the vertex without even graphing it? See if you see the pattern. It's there. See if you see it. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to punch in the graph that we just got here into MyMathLab. I'm going to show you how I got this. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to this graph paper right here, you could go to click enlarge, but that doesn't work, at least not on my machine. So click on this graph and then click on the parabola shape, the one opening upward. And you're going to want to punch in the vertex first, which was at -7, 0, remember. So if you scroll down a little bit, you can see what point the cursor is on, that the cursor is actually pointing to. So we want to point to that vertex, and so we want this ordered pair to be -7, 0. So that would be right there. And then we need to plot one more point on the graph. Any of those points other than the vertex will work. I'm going to plot -6, 1. So, you got to scroll back down for whatever reason, and then go to -6, 1. Okay, there it is. And that guy is done. And click anywhere else on the graph so that it's not highlighted, so that the parabola is not highlighted anymore. And you're also told to graph the axis of symmetry as a dashed line. So what we're going to do is click on the dashed line tool and click on the line tool, and we're going to graph the axis of symmetry, the line that cuts this thing in half. All you have to do is make sure the first coordinate is at -7. You could go ahead and click on the vertex, and it'll put a point on your line right there. And then, okay, got to keep scrolling back down so I can see this ordered pair here. And then just highlight any other point with a first coordinate of -7. Doesn't matter where, any point on this vertical line will work. You just want to graph that vertical line. And so there it is. Then go down to check answer, and it likes the answer. So that's how you punch in or input the graph into MyMathLab.